Millionaire's baby cried nonstop on the plane until an underprivileged black boy did the unthinkable. The lights in the first-class cabin of United Airlines Flight 902 dim to a soft gold, but peace never arrives. Instead, a single piercing sound shreds through recycled air, the relentless wail of a millionaire's baby. Lily Carver, only 6 months old, screams with such force that passengers flinch as if the engines have failed. Her father, James Carver, 45, billionaire tech icon, sits powerless in his leather seat, a monogrammed handkerchief slipping through his trembling hands. His tailored confidence crumbles with each shriek. Businessmen pound their laptops. Shut. A woman hisses into her scarf. A flight attendant's painted smile fractures. Everyone is watching. Everyone is judging. James whispers, "I can't do this," and the words die in the roar of his daughter's cries. Then silence breaks again. Gasps this time. An announcement fails to drown the tension. Behind the velvet curtain of first class, in the cramped shadows of economy, 17-year-old Darius Williams lifts his head. A chess prodigy from Chicago's South Side, hoodie frayed at the cuffs, ticket paid with sacrifice, bound for London's International Championship, the tournament that could change his life. He should be focused on openings and end games. But the cry twists through him. He remembers nights pacing the floor with his baby sister when his mother said he had magic hands. He feels it now, stronger, heavier, undeniable. Passengers glance back as Darius stands. The curtain sways like a barrier between two worlds. A flight attendant blocks him, eyes cold with skepticism, lips parting to dismiss him. And yet, Darius steps forward. The baby screams louder. The mogul looks up, hollow-eyed. In that moment, two lives collide at 30,000 feet. What happens next will leave you breathless. 6 hours before takeoff, Chicago wore gray, drizzle-glazing streets and smearing taillights into watery streaks. In a tight South Side apartment, Darius Williams laced scuffed sneakers and tried to slow the metronome in his chest. His mother, Tanya, a nurse's aide fresh from a night shift, moved through the kitchenette with careful economy, fatigue in her shoulders, pride bright in her eyes. She slid an envelope across the wobbly table, a week's tips, folded twice, and declared a taxi to O'Hare non-negotiable. Darius started to protest, but one lifted finger ended the debate, the same look she wore when bills outlasted paychecks. In the bedroom, his sister, Nia, knelt on the threadbare rug and arranged his travel chess set with tender precision, cleaning each base with the corner of her t-shirt. She lined white on the right, checked the knight's ears, clicked the tin, shut, then opened it again to slip in a note. "You already see 3 moves ahead. I believe in you." From the window, the city's music drifted in. Car horns talking over one another, a bus wheezing at the curb, the distant rattle of the L carving its iron sentence through the chill. He breathed with the rhythm and pictured the London hall. Clocks clicking, scores posted in clean columns, nerves tightened anyway. He knew lines and traps. Yet anxiety threaded through him like wire because scouts would be there and a scholarship might hinge on a single endgame. Tanya set a mug of instant coffee in front of him and slid over sugar packets saved from break rooms. "Taxi," she repeated, gentler now, wanting him to arrive rested, not bent from buses. He nodded, honoring her steadiness. Nia slung his backpack over his shoulder and asked if the lucky penny under the board still rode with him. He said yes, and it was true. He had never peeled the tape. The cab they flagged smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and peppermint gum. Rain beaded the windows. Buildings slid by in soft focus. A siren flared and vanished at an intersection. Darius watched a worker wave traffic around a pothole, watched a woman herd 3 kids beneath one umbrella, and felt the city tug at him, a pull equal parts gravity and promise. At O'Hare, Tanya hugged him hard and pressed 2 folded 20s. into his palm. "For food that doesn't come in a bag," she said. Nia filmed a quick video pep talk. He walked toward security with a boarding pass and the sense that the people he loved were pushing him forward, steady and unrelenting. Across town, Lake Michigan lay pewter under a sky the color of unpolished steel. In a glass-walled penthouse above the shoreline, James Carver paced between desk and window, a wireless bud in one ear, Lily's travel bassinet within reach. He had been awake since 3 for a video call with his Tokyo engineering team. The wall screen still showed schematic views and a timeline pulsing red where a supplier delay threatened a launch. He asked for contingencies, then contingencies to the contingencies, voice clipped, while his assistant, Lauren, moved through the room collecting chargers and printing revised itineraries. A notification chimed. Lily's nanny had canceled due to a fever. Commercial, then, not the jet. Elise was already in Paris, and he had promised to reach her by evening. He rerouted, without hesitation, United to Paris, first class, Lily in his arms, work stitched between bottle feeds. Control was a habit. If a path existed, he took it, and if none existed, he forced one. Lauren updated the booking, packed spare clothes for both, and met his raised brows with a practiced nod. The penthouse smelled of lemon oil and new leather. Windows cut the morning into geometric brightness. James lifted Lily and swayed, one hand at her head, the other steadying the blanket Elise had chosen for softness. He tried a song, lost the words, tried silence, heard only the quiet clock. He checked stroller buckles, spare pacifiers, and Lauren's list in a clean, unwavering font, telling himself preparation would be enough. At the terminal, the first-class lounge looked like a sanctuary. Low lamps, soft rugs, a barista steaming. Milk, magazines aligned by ruler. James bounced Lily and scanned a spreadsheet while a news ticker crept along a mounted screen. He barely registered families around him, the clatter of cups, the slide of wheels over carpet. He did not notice a teenager in the economy several corridors away dropping a backpack onto a plastic chair or the scuffed tin set the boy would soon open. Darius watched planes nose toward rain and weighed the tin in his palm. He found a window, seat near the gate where ground crews drew arcs through puddles and luggage carts hummed in patterns. He ran variations under his breath, structure first, then tactics, while announcements stacked in a polite monotone. When his group was called, he walked the jet bridge with deliberate calm, stowed his backpack, slid into his seat, and tucked. His elbows close. Across a curtain, James fastened his belt and secured Lily's bassinet, asking a passing attendant to nudge the temperature up a degree. The engine whine rose to a steady thrum. Tires lifted. City and lake fell away into cloud. Between them stretched more than aisles. There were histories and habits of effort. Darius had learned to make every dollar count, to study with bus breaks, squealing outside and radio chatter threading through algebra. James had learned to expect results if he pressed hard enough, to hire solutions when time and talent needed multiplying. Both believed in momentum, though one endured it and the other manufactured it, and fate played chaperone as the flight found its level. The city's bustle receded. The L's clatter softened into the aircraft's even hum. The penthouse's glass geometry gave way to a round window's bright oval, the heroics of a nurse's aide and the privileges of a CEO carried together into weather and sky. Neither saw the other, not yet, though their courses had begun to bend. Hearts tapped rhythms. A baby dozed, then stirred. A boy touched a folded note. A man reviewed a plan that insisted nothing escaped control. They were, each in a different way, almost ready for a moment that would argue otherwise. While James waited to board, he juggled phone, bottle, and blanket with a precision suited to spreadsheets, discovering how quickly order phrase when a cap won't thread or a burp cloth slides to the floor. He tried the rock Elise favored, a gentle figure 8, felt a flicker of relief as Lily's eyelids dipped, then sprang wide again. He offered a pacifier. She rejected it with certainty. A traveler smiled. Another stared as if tantrums were optional for those who could buy quiet. James kept moving, counting breaths, rehearsing contingencies that had nothing to do with supply chains. Millions traveled with babies every day, he told himself. Competence could be learned in motion. Across the concourse, Darius joined a line, curling past a breakfast kiosk, air warm with cinnamon and dough. He bought a sandwich, texted Nia a smiley, and wrote, "Boarding soon?" adding a rook emoji because words felt too heavy for hope in his chest. The flight had been in the air for 45 minutes when the cabin's uneasy rhythm began to fracture. At first, Lily Carver whimpered, a low, restless murmur that blended with the thrum of the engines and the occasional rustle of newspapers. But within minutes, the sounds sharpened into ragged cries, small fists flailing against her blanket. James Carver, so often the embodiment of control, felt sweat gather beneath the collar of his white shirt. He shifted Lily against his chest, tried a pacifier, then another, but she spat them out with sharp defiance, her cheeks blotched crimson. He reached for a plush toy Elise had insisted he pack, rattled it with forced cheer, but Lily only shrieked louder, back arching, tiny body rigid. The businessman across the aisle sighed with theatrical weight, slipped on noise-canceling headphones, and snapped his laptop open again as though sealing himself away from the nuisance. A couple in matching travel pillows exchanged a look that mixed pity with irritation. An elderly woman 2 rows ahead muttered into her shawl, shaking her head in disapproval. Each glance carried weight, invisible darts pricking James's composure. He dabbed his forehead with the monogrammed handkerchief, letters JC now damp, while whispering to Lily as if reason could bargain with her lungs. Flight attendants approached, with smiles that strained under the pressure of performance. One suggested adjusting the seatbelt extender for Lily's comfort, and another offered warm water for formula. James complied with each in turn, desperate for reprieve, but nothing dulled the cries. A pacifier clattered to the floor, rolling under the seat in front. James bent, retrieved it, wiped it furiously against the cloth of his trousers, offered it again, and watched his daughter spit it onto the armrest. He pressed his temple against the seat back, pulse hammering with the awareness that every passenger's patience thinned. He heard it in the coughs, the shifting bodies, the murmurs blooming like weeds in fertile silence. In the economy, Darius Williams tried to bury himself in chess notes, his fingers moving pieces across the magnetic board clipped to the fold-down tray. He studied pawn structures, rehearsed openings, but Lily's cries pierced through every line of concentration. The rhythm of her distress made his mind stumble. He misplaced a bishop, frowned, and reset. Each scream drew him back to nights on. The South Side when his sister Nia's colic had filled the apartment, when he had learned how to rock and hum, to apply gentle pressure that soothed where medicine could not. The memory brought a tug of responsibility, but he told himself this was not his problem. He was a passenger, a teenager with a championship looming, not a savior for a tech mogul's child. Still, guilt stirred. He thought of Tanya, who would never let a baby cry without trying. He heard his own voice in memory, humming, steady, while Nia's sobs subsided against his shoulder. He closed the set, slid it back into its tin, and stared at the ceiling where the air vents whispered like indifferent stars. Have you ever felt everyone's eyes on you, judging, waiting for you to fail? Share your story in the comments. The B. Flight attendants tried again, this time suggesting that James walk the aisle. That motion might lull the child. He rose. Lily pressed to his chest, pacing under the watchful eyes of strangers who leaned back to avoid brushing against him. He whispered apologies with each step, though none answered. The businessman with headphones raised his brows, shook his head, and typed furiously as though even the sight of disruption deserved disdain. James's throat felt raw, his voice breaking when he whispered, "Please, Lily, please!" He had closed deals worth billions, had bent markets with his decisions, but now stood helpless before a 6-month-old's howl. He returned to his seat, hair damp with sweat, tie loosened, and muttered, "I'll pay anyone to stop her crying." The words slipped out hoarse, uncalculated, a confession torn from desperation. Darius heard it through the curtain, a plea pitched lower than the engines. He felt heat rise in his chest, a mix of sympathy and indignation. Money, always the answer for men like Carver. He glanced around the economy, saw passengers rolling eyes, tugging blankets higher, muttering complaints. He felt the judgment bleeding. Through the cabin, directed at James, at Lily, at anyone who failed to contain chaos. He recognized it because he had lived under it, the gaze that assumed failure before effort, that weighed skin color and hoodie fabric before character. He stood, heart pounding. The flight attendant moving down the aisle halted, her tray balanced, lips parting in surprise. "I think I can help," Darius said quietly. Her eyes flicked over him, taking in the worn hoodie, the frayed backpack strap, the scuffed sneakers. Doubt shadowed her face. "You're in economy," she said, tone hushed, but edged with skepticism, as though his ticket determined his competence. He felt the pause in her gaze linger on his skin, an unspoken judgment. He straightened, holding her stare. "I've done this before. Just let me try." Passengers nearby leaned forward, curiosity pricked by the audacity of a teenager stepping into turbulence where wealth and authority had failed. The attendant hesitated, then gestured reluctantly, her body angled as though shielding him from intrusion into a world not meant for him. The curtains swayed open, revealing first class like another realm. Wide seats, hushed lighting, passengers cloaked in privilege. Every head turned. James sat hunched, shirt wrinkled, hair damp, Lily pressed against his chest as though he could mold her cries into silence by force of will. His eyes, glassy with exhaustion, lifted toward the figure stepping forward. Darius moved past the attendant, his palms steady though his pulse rattled in his ears. James stared, confusion etched across. His features, a flicker of doubt tightening his jaw as if to say, "Who are you to imagine you can do better?" Darius met his gaze without flinching. "Sir," he said, voice even, "I can help her." Suspense thickened the air, the moment stretching between skepticism and possibility, between the collapse of composure and the risk of belief. And with one step closer, the boy from the economy offered what no wealth could buy, the chance for quiet, the chance for relief, the chance for a bridge neither of them had expected to cross. James hesitated as Darius stepped closer, his arms wrapped tightly around Lily, the baby's sobs reaching a pitch that made every passenger stiffen in their seats. For a moment, the mogul's instinct was to recoil, to shield his daughter from the stranger in the worn hoodie, but exhaustion dulled his resistance. His once perfect composure had collapsed into sweat-soaked disarray. His tie hung loose, his bespoke shirt wrinkled, his patience shattered. Lily's cries tore through him, through the cabin, through every attempt at logic. He studied the boy's face, young but steady, eyes calm, a confidence that didn't come from arrogance but from knowing. Against every reflex that told him to dismiss, to distrust, he extended Lily into Darius's waiting arms. The transition was immediate. Darius positioned her carefully, one palm cradling her head, the other supporting her back. He shifted her weight slightly, finding a natural angle that James had fumbled to replicate. Lily thrashed for a second, her scream faltering as if startled by the change. Darius pressed 2 fingers gently against her abdomen, applying light, practiced pressure to the place he remembered from nights pacing his apartment with Nia. He began to hum, not a song from any radio, but a low, steady vibration that seemed to thread through the air like a secret code. The sound was rhythmic, even, a heartbeat in melody, and within seconds Lily's wails broke into hiccuping gasps. The cabin shifted. Tension dissolved in a collective exhale. A dozen strangers leaning back into their seats as if they had all been holding their breath at once. The businessman lowered his headphones to confirm what he was hearing, blinking in disbelief. The elderly woman in row 3 pressed her hand to her chest and murmured, "Well, I'll be—" The attendants exchanged glances, embarrassment flickering across their polished smiles as the boy in economy achieved what their training manuals had not prepared them for. James froze, eyes wide, as Lily's cries dwindled to soft hiccups, then quiet murmurs against Darius's shoulder. For the first time in nearly an hour, the child's body unclenched, her fists loosening, her breathing syncing with the rhythm of the hum. Darius swayed gently, fingers adjusting pressure in small movements, explaining in a low voice, "It's gas relief. When my sister was a baby, she had colic so bad that it kept us awake all night. I figured out these pressure points, learned how to hum low enough for her to feel it more than hear it. Works faster than rocking sometimes." James blinked, stunned by the casual clarity. His daughter, the one whose cries had defied toys, bottles, pacifiers, and money, now drifted into drowsy calm in the arms of a teenager in a hoodie with a chess set stuffed in his backpack. Every assumption he carried cracked under the weight of that image. Wealth hadn't solved this. Status hadn't solved this. A boy who had grown up far from penthouses and private jets had stepped into first class and done what seemed unthinkable. Sometimes solutions come from unexpected places. Have you ever been surprised by someone's hidden talent? Let us know. Below, Darius continued humming, shifting slightly to test Lily's comfort. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy now, her cries reduced to faint hiccups that disappeared altogether. Around them, the silence rang louder than the screams had, filled with awe and relief. The businessman returned his laptop to the tray, though he did not type. He watched. The elderly woman smiled, shaking her head in quiet admiration. A couple who had once glared now whispered, "Incredible." Even the attendants who had doubted him moments before straightened their shoulders, forced to swallow their skepticism. James's throat tightened, not with frustration this time, but with something rawer, gratitude, awe, maybe shame. He wiped, his palms on his trousers, realizing he had been gripping the armrests so tightly that his knuckles were pale. He felt the weight of his own prejudgment, how he had looked at Darius and seen only economy, only skin, only class. And yet here was this boy holding his world, calming what he could not. James leaned forward, voice hoarse but steady. "How did you know?" Darius shrugged lightly, careful not to disturb Lily. "Experience," he said simply. "My mom worked nights. My sister needed soothing. I had to figure it out. You learn when you don't have choices." He smiled faintly, eyes never leaving Lily's face. "Babies like rhythm. They like security. Doesn't matter if you're rich or broke, they just need comfort." The truth of it struck James harder than he expected. For decades, he had built a life on the principle that everything could be bought, talent hired, problems outsourced, crises solved with resources. But in this moment, none of it had mattered. A teenager from the South Side had reminded him that some things, patience, instinct, compassion, were not commodities. The flight attendant who had doubted Darius stood nearby, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She glanced at James, then at Darius, as if silently apologizing for her skepticism. James caught the look and understood it too well, because it mirrored the one inside his own chest. He had doubted first, questioned worth before, evidence and been humbled. Darius shifted Lily back into James's arms, guiding him with quiet instruction. "Hold her head like this, keep the pressure light here. If she stirs, hum low, almost like you're talking without words. It's more about the vibration than the sound." James followed, awkward at first, then steadier as Lily snuggled against him, drowsy and soothed. The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on him, a billionaire CEO taking cues from a boy half his age on how to cradle his child, but absurdity bent toward truth. James looked at Darius, his voice softer now. "You've just saved me and her, more than you know." Darius shook his head. "I just did what I could. That's all." The humility in his tone struck James again. No boasting, no arrogance, just quiet competence. He felt a rare flush of humility himself, a recognition that his assumptions had blinded him. He glanced at the empty seat beside him, then back toward the curtain separating first class from economy. "You shouldn't be back there," James said. "Come sit here. You've earned it." Darius blinked, surprised, but James was already, signaling to the attendant, asking her to bring the boy's bag from economy. There was no resistance this time, no skepticism in her face. She nodded quickly, retrieved the scuffed backpack, and placed it by the seat. Darius lowered himself into the plush leather, unsure of the sudden luxury beneath him, the space that seemed to mock his cramped row in economy. Yet he sat with quiet dignity, adjusting his hoodie, resting the tin chess set on his lap. Around them, the cabin felt different, lighter, warmer, infused with respect rather than tension. Where passengers had once scowled and muttered, they now leaned into the calm, their gazes softened by admiration for the boy who had done what none of them had dared try. James leaned back, still cradling Lily, his tailored image undone but irrelevant. In that moment, the CEO and the chess prodigy sat side by side, stereotypes broken, the air charged with the recognition that wisdom and talent often come from places least expected. The engines droned on, steady and constant, but inside the cabin, something had shifted. The story of this flight was no longer about cries and frustration, but about a bridge built in the quiet hum of compassion. The cabin had settled into a rare hush, the kind that only comes after hours of tension suddenly lifted. Engines hummed with a steady rhythm, dim lights glowed faintly amber, and the air carried a softness absent before. James sat with Lily nestled against his chest, her small breaths brushing the fabric of his shirt, while Darius rested beside him, backpack at his feet, tin chess set balanced on his knees. It felt improbable, two worlds colliding in a single row, but improbability had birthed something neither had expected, quiet, calm, and the beginning of conversation. James turned, studying the boy who had transformed the flight. "So, chess," he said, his voice almost tentative. "That little set you keep handling, how serious are you about it?" Darius smiled faintly, brushing his thumb over the tin. "Serious enough that it's pretty much my whole future. I'm playing in the International Junior Championship in London. If I do well, there are scholarships, maybe even a sponsorship. If I don't..." He let the sentence fade, the weight of unspoken consequences filling the pause. James raised his brows. "International? That's not small. I'm ranked junior master already," Darius admitted, modest but firm. "It took years of grinding tournaments, playing in parks, studying openings from books the library barely kept in print. I've faced some of the best in the state, and now it's time to test myself against the world." The admission startled James. He leaned back, adjusting Lily carefully. "Junior master? At 17? That's extraordinary." Darius shrugged, his humility deliberate. "Extraordinary doesn't mean much where I come from. People hear South Side and expect trouble, not trophies." He glanced at his hands. "Half the time, they don't even believe I play, but the board doesn't care where you come from. It just asks, 'Can you see the move?'" James felt the words like a tap at the armor he wore daily. He had built Carver Innovations from a two-man startup into a global enterprise, but even in his early days, credibility had been currency he had to buy, prove, and defend. "You know, he said. I remember nights when I maxed out credit cards just to pay patent fees. Everyone told me it was reckless. They saw a dreamer, not a CEO. The difference was that I had investors willing to listen eventually. You didn't. The boy met his gaze, eyes sharp. I had my mom and sister. That was enough to keep me moving. James nodded slowly, respect, dawning in place of skepticism. Ever found common ground with someone completely different? Share your thoughts in the comments. Darius opened the tin set and arranged the pieces with quick precision, the magnet bases clicking into place. Want to play? He asked. James chuckled, shaking his head. You'd destroy me. Not if I teach, Darius countered. Chess isn't just about beating people. It's about seeing possibilities they didn't know were there. He set the board between them, inviting James into its geometry. We'll play, but I'll explain as we go. That way, even if you lose, you'll win something. James accepted, sliding a pawn forward. His movements were hesitant, the kind of tentative play of someone unaccustomed to strategy beyond the immediate. Darius watched without judgment, then demonstrated how each choice opened patterns, how sacrifice wasn't failure but foresight. Sometimes giving up a piece creates the path you didn't think existed. That's life too, Darius said, voice quiet but sure. James moved a rook, then frowned as Darius responded with fluid ease, explaining traps, forks, and defenses with clarity. Yet he never mocked, never gloated. His tone carried patience, as though teaching his little sister, rather than proving superiority. James found himself leaning in, curious despite fatigue. He realized that while he was CEO of a billion-dollar company, in this moment, he was a student again, taught by a boy society underestimated. Lily stirred then, a faint whimper rising from sleep. James stiffened, but before panic could return, Darius reached over lightly. Keep her head tucked closer like this, he instructed gently. Now hum low, not words, just sound. Let her feel it more than hear it. James followed, awkward at first, but gradually the vibration soothed. Lily settled again, her tiny hand curling around his finger. James looked down in disbelief, then back at Darius. It actually works, Darius grinned. Told you, babies don't care how much money you make. They care if you can listen. That truth struck deeper than any lesson James had expected. He thought of his empire, his endless schedule, the constant push for control, and how quickly it unraveled when faced with something so simple yet so profound. He found himself asking questions about Darius's training, his games in Chicago, Parks, and the mentors who had taught him tactics. Darius spoke of opponents older and stronger, of hustlers who underestimated him until he turned boards into battlegrounds, of studying grandmaster matches on a cracked laptop. His voice carried pride not in victories alone, but in persistence. In the grit it took to keep going without sponsorships or polished arenas. James listened, genuinely absorbed. He told stories of his own beginnings, nights coding in basements, rejection letters piling up, the thin line between collapse and breakthrough. He described moments of doubt when Elise reminded him to keep moving forward, times when investors laughed, but he pressed anyway. For the first time in years, he spoke not as a mogul, but as a man who remembered what it meant to fight uphill. The conversation stretched, threads weaving into a bond neither had anticipated. Passengers nearby noticed, glancing occasionally, but no one interrupted. The cabin felt like its own world, dim, humming, intimate, where class, money, and stereotypes blurred. Darius adjusted a night, explaining the importance of patience, while James nodded, realizing patience had been his missing skill as a father. He asked Darius to demonstrate again how to hold Lily when she stirred, and the boy guided his arms until confidence replaced hesitation. You know, James said, finally, you've taught me more in this hour than I've learned in half a lifetime of boardrooms. Darius smiled, modest but proud. And you've listened. which is more than most people do. The game ended with Darius ahead, but he had not crushed James. Instead, he paused, explained, offered alternatives, and made the board a lesson rather than a conquest. James recognized the humility, the quiet generosity, and found himself reassessing every assumption he had carried onto the plane. This boy was not just a passenger in the economy. He was a talent unrecognized, a potential waiting to be valued, a wisdom born of necessity rather than privilege. As the engines droned and the cabin dimmed further, both leaned back, a strange peace between them. James looked at the sleeping child in his arms, then at the boy beside him, and felt gratitude swell. Darius, for the first time in hours, felt seen not as a kid in a hoodie, but as someone whose presence mattered. Two lives had collided at 30,000 feet, not in conflict now, but in recognition, and somewhere between the moves on a travel chess set and the soft hum that calmed a child, both discovered that common ground is not a luxury but a choice, one that changes everything. Morning light washed London as Darius entered Royal Exchange Hall, a cathedral of chess framed by marble columns, sunlit windows, and banners from 5 continents. The room hummed with quiet electricity, boards aligned in flawless ranks, clocks ticking like disciplined hearts, arbiters moving in soft-soled shoes, cameras poised for drama. Players arrived in waves, blazers, tracksuits, careful smiles, faces from Lagos, Berlin, Seoul, São Paulo, Odessa, and Chicago, each carrying a private story behind a crest. Darius checked in, accepted his badge, and found a corner where warmth painted the oak. He laid out his travel set, felt the magnetized bases lock, and breathed through a steady 4 count. Preparation became ritual. Hydrate, stretch, review lines, rehearse endings, trust the work. His phone buzzed. James texted from Paris. "You've got this. Elise and I are streaming. Lily is napping like a champ." A selfie followed. Elise with a purple blanket, Lily asleep, one tiny fist near her cheek. Darius replied with a rook emoji and flipped the device face down. Round 1 paired him with a Romanian tactician who loved chaos. Darius built a calm structure, invited impatience, harvested the loose square, and converted without flourish. Round 2 brought a Moroccan prodigy, who calculated like lightning. Darius slowed the game to a simple rook ending, engineered a distant passer, forced zugzwang, and nodded at resignation. Round 3 met a French specialist in offbeat sidelines. He kept the center pure, improved every piece, then sprang a clean fork. By late afternoon, he stood perfect, nerves taut, focus deeper. In Paris, James set a tablet beside a baby monitor while Elise poured tea. Lily slept near the window, soothed earlier by the low hum Darius had taught somewhere over the Atlantic. "He's composed," Elise whispered. James agreed, feeling patience as a physical skill. Round 5 tightened the field. An Indian theoretician sprang from the preparation Darius had once skimmed. He trusted structure, offered an exchange for time, and let initiative sing through opposite-colored bishops until tactics repaid everything with interest. The semifinal posting glowed at dusk. Darius Williams versus Ethan Parker, reigning American. Junior champion, sponsor darling, smile never reaching the eyes. At the table, Ethan leaned close. "Nice streak, Southside. Hope you enjoyed it." Darius met the stare like a complex position. Note the pattern, find the lever. A Sicilian promised imbalance. Ethan blitzed. Pieces snapped to squares with theatrical speed. Darius anchored pawns, tightened dark squares, and ignored chatter disguised as advice. Momentum flipped when he remembered an obscure backward knight move he had learned at 2 in the morning. He slid the piece back, feigning retreat. Ethan grabbed a pawn and walked into a net tightening around his queen. A quiet intermezzo sealed. The file. The handshake came stiff, the smile gone. Reporters circled. Darius kept answers short and walked into cool night air with rain sounds in his earbuds. London breathed. Buses sighed, bells tolled, the river moved with indifferent grace. He texted Tanya and Nia, then read James's message. Proud of you. Keep pressing for the good squares. The final dawned clear. The hall smelled of lemon polish and warm dust, light pouring through high windows like theater spots. His opponent, Hans Müller, a German prodigy with surgeon's focus, arranged pieces with metronomic care. Where Ethan had been noise, Hans was silence. Arbiters settled, clocks started, and the world narrowed to geometry. The opening followed a Nimzo Indian path, tension coiling around E4 and C4. Hans squeezed space, traded minor pieces, laid a positional, trapped that tempted queenside greed while danger simmered near Darius's king. Darius answered with restriction, hemming bishops, waiting for air to thin. A tactical squall flashed. Sacrifice, check, deflection, passed pawn, counter-sacrifice. Spectators leaned forward, whispers mixing languages beneath the arched ceiling. Darius reached time control with seconds to spare and a position equal on, the surface yet alive underneath. During the break, he stood by a tall window, counted breaths on fingertips, felt the sun warm his face. In Paris, James and Elise sat shoulder to shoulder, coffee cooling. Whenever Lily stirred, James placed her to his chest and hummed. She melted back to sleep before the stream could buffer. He recognized on the board a tension business rarely teaches, patience braided with nerve. Back at play, Hans produced an improvement that pinned Darius to a brittle kingside, pawns fixed, a knight misplaced. The Germans advanced methodically, squares claimed like parcels on a map. Commentators praised the technique. Darius went still. He looked past leaves to see the forest, past fear to find shape. Pattern recognition lifted a memory, a forgotten master's idea where a doomed knight leapt to glory. He calculated deep, verified forcing lines, checked king safety, and saw it. An audacious sacrifice cracking the position at exactly the seam between Hans's pieces. He placed the knight with a calm that felt like oxygen returning. Gasps rippled, cameras zoomed, Hans's eyebrows ticked. If taken, the blow unleashed check, skewer, discovered attack. If ignored, an outpost monster would cement domination. Hans captured. Silence tightened. Darius delivered a check, then another. Then a quiet, consolidating move that made sense only when the next tactic landed. Rooks doubled, bishop carved a gleaming diagonal. Queen arrived as sealant, not hammer. Hans defended resourcefully, returned material, hunted perpetual checks, but the evaluation had crossed a line. The liquidation that followed yielded a winning ending. Outside passer and active king. After 4 precise moves, Hans extended a key hand, respect steady. Applause swelled under stone, sound rising like a tide. Darius stood beneath the light, chest tight with relief and joy, hearing Tanya in memory, seeing Nia's note tucked in the tin. A medal cooled against his collarbone. Cameras flashed. Volunteers clapped with honest delight. In Paris, James lifted. Lillian spun once, making Elise laugh through happy tears. A message crossed the channel. Champion. Dinner when you reach town. Proud beyond words. Darius read it beside the podium, thumbs trembling, and answered, "Thank you for believing." He looked over the hall while workers stacked chairs and streaming rigs blinked to rest, sun slipping from the high panes. He knew this triumph was not an endpoint, but a move inside a larger game, one that began when a boy crossed a curtain at 30,000 feet and taught a father how to listen. Outside the entrance, evening gathered in a haze over Threadneedle Street, and a breeze carried the mixed scents of rain, diesel, and bakery. Darius stepped into it with the medal in his pocket and the chess set in his hand, feeling lighter yet, steadier, as if a line inside had aligned. He called Tanya, let the applause through the speaker wash across his mother's laughter, then promised Nia a video of the decisive combination. Across Paris, James typed again, slower now, telling him that Elise had scheduled a celebration and that Lily, unaware, was sleeping through another perfect lullaby. Darius smiled at the thought, then booked a morning train, choosing time to breathe rather than a plane. He returned to his room, spread score sheets on the desk, and annotated the sacrifice with arrows and notes for future study. Before sleep, "Took him," he whispered a simple vow. "Keep the humility, keep the hunger, keep seeing the move no one expects." Paris gleamed beneath a pale morning sun as the cab turned onto Avenue George V, and Darius pressed his forehead to the glass, his breath fogging faint circles. The limestone facade of the Four Seasons Hotel rose like something out of a dream. Balconies, wrapped in wrought iron, flowers spilling crimson from carved sills, a line of flags whispering in the breeze. The entrance shimmered with polished brass and marble steps that seemed too pristine to touch. For a moment he hesitated, wondering if the driver had made a mistake. This place was for royalty, for CEOs, not for a boy from Chicago's South Side carrying a tin chess set in his backpack. Yet the doorman in a tailored coat swung open the car door with a smile, and suddenly Darius was stepping onto the cobblestone, sneakers squeaking faintly against history. Inside, the lobby glowed with chandeliers casting fractured rainbows over polished stone. Perfume from fresh orchids drifted in the air, mixing with the rich aroma of roasted coffee. The receptionist addressed him as Monsieur Williams, handing over a key card embossed with gold. His hands trembled slightly as he rode the elevator, heart climbing faster than the numbers. When the doors opened, he found a suite painted in cream and gold, velvet drapes framing a view of the Eiffel Tower slicing the horizon. He dropped his bag, opened the balcony doors, and let the wind lift his hoodie, tasting the foreign sweetness of Paris on his lips. The bed looked as large as his entire apartment back home. The marble bathroom gleamed with fixtures that could have passed as sculpture. He stood still for a long minute, awe pressing into his ribs, then whispered, "Mom, I made it," though Tanya was an ocean away. The next morning, he walked into the hotel's restaurant, where breakfast unfolded like theater. Silver cloches, lifted to reveal pastries that glistened, servers pouring orange juice from crystal pitchers, sunlight cutting across linen so white it almost glowed. James sat at a corner table, Lily balanced against his shoulder, Elise opposite him in an emerald dress, her elegance sharpened by curiosity. She looked up when she saw Darius approach. Surprise flickered, eyebrows raised, lips parting slightly, before Lily cooed at the sight of him, reaching tiny fingers toward his face. Elise's expression softened instantly, disbelief melting into warmth. "So, this is the boy who saved you both mid-air," she said, half in wonder, half in gratitude. James gestured for him to sit. "Not just saved," he replied. "He taught me, and I want him to teach us more." Over plates of croissants and steaming coffee, conversation wove easily. James spoke of sleepless nights where wealth felt useless, of realizing competence required humility. Elise listened closely, nodding. When Darius explained how babies responded to rhythm and steady touch more than gadgets, he demonstrated by gently shifting Lily onto his lap, supporting her head, and applying that practiced pressure near her stomach. She quieted at once, her gaze locked on his, her breathing smooth. Elise leaned forward, watching carefully. "It looks so natural when you do it," she murmured. "I never would have thought." Darius smiled shyly. "It's not about tricks. It's about listening." James placed his cup down with deliberate weight. "Darius, I want to propose something. Stay with us this week. Help us care for Lily. More importantly, I want to support your future. The Reed Foundation has scholarships for students of exceptional promise. But I believe you deserve more than paperwork. You deserve mentorship and security. Let us sponsor you." Darius froze, fork midway to his plate. His chest tightened, not with fear but with disbelief that bordered on reverence. A scholarship meant relief for Tanya, stability for Nia, the ability to focus on his gift without the constant grind of survival. He thought of the cramped apartment, the unpaid bills, the sacrifices his mother carried like invisible armor. His voice caught. "Are you sure?" James nodded, conviction in his tone. "Absolutely. You showed me that emotional intelligence is as valuable as any innovation. You bridged divides I didn't know how to cross. That's a skill the world undervalues, but it shouldn't. Let me help you continue your journey." Elise reached across, squeezing Darius's hand. "Have you ever been given a chance that changed everything? Tell us below." For the rest of breakfast, Darius guided them in small lessons. How to cradle Lily when her stomach tightened. How to hum at the right pitch so vibration calmed more than sound. How patience sometimes outweighed tools. James leaned in like a student again, repeating techniques until his daughter nestled against him with ease. Elise practiced, laughing nervously, then glowing when Lily responded. The barrier between their worlds thinned, replaced by mutual respect, by the understanding that wisdom crosses boundaries freely when people are willing to listen. Later, in the quiet of his suite, Darius paced the balcony, phone pressed to his ear. The Eiffel Tower shimmered under morning light as Tanya answered, her voice scratchy with exhaustion. He told her everything, the hotel, the breakfast, the offer. Silence stretched, then a sob caught across the line. "Baby, you did it," she whispered. He heard pride, relief, and love heavy enough to bend distance. "Take it. Take every chance. We'll be fine here. Just promise you'll stay humble." Nia's voice broke in from the background. "Tell him I want a tour of the Eiffel Tower. On video!" Darius laughed, wiping at his eyes. "I'll send it today, promise." He looked out over Paris, at the city alive with possibility, and felt the decision root in his chest. He returned downstairs, found James and Elise with Lily, near the lobby, and nodded firmly. "I accept." James smiled, relief plain, while Elise hugged him, Lily squealing happily between them. In that moment, it wasn't about wealth or poverty, first class or economy, but about connection, proof that empathy and talent could redraw boundaries. Darius carried his chest set still, but now he also carried a future reshaped by kindness and recognition, a story that had begun with cries in the sky and ended with hope on Parisian stone. Evening draped Paris in amber as Darius stepped out of the Four Seasons with James, the city humming softly beyond the limestone facade. The air held a crispness that hinted at autumn, carrying scents of roasted chestnuts from street vendors, and the faint sweetness of patisserie windows left ajar. Together they walked toward the Seine, the pavement glowing under lamplight, shadows stretching long across cobblestones polished by centuries of steps. Tourboats slid by, their decks strung with white bulbs that shimmered across the waters. Surface, casting broken diamonds on the current. Musicians on the quay played violins that threaded melancholy through laughter drifting from cafe terraces. The river's reflection painted their faces gold, as if inviting them into its memory. James broke the silence first, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You've changed the way I think," he admitted, voice low, nearly drowned by the lapping tide. "I've built a life measuring value in patents, contracts, and quarterly reports. But what you did on that plane showed me that intelligence isn't just innovation or code. It's empathy. It's the ability to soothe, to connect, to see need and respond. We've never rewarded that properly. I intend to change it." Darius glanced sideways, cautious yet curious. "What do you mean?" "The Reed Foundation will launch a new initiative," James explained. Programs that highlight caregiving skills in underserved communities. Scholarships for those who've developed wisdom through necessity, raising siblings, caring for relatives, holding families together. We'll fund research, mentorship, and education. And we'll do it in your name, because you were the catalyst. The words hit Darius like a tide. He slowed his steps, watching the golden river bend around Ile de la Cité. I don't want to be anyone's mascot, he said carefully. I can't be a story that makes people feel better about charity. My independence matters. I earned what I've achieved. James stopped, turning to face him, the glow of a street lamp cutting shadow into the lines around his eyes. You're right. Privilege has blinded me for years. I could buy silence, comfort, solutions, while people like you had to invent them. This initiative won't patronize. It'll amplify. You'll be part of the leadership, not a symbol. I need your perspective, your honesty. Without it, the program is just another check written to soothe conscience. The sincerity in his tone rang louder than the violin across the key. Darius breathed slowly, letting the moment sink in. One night on a plane doesn't make me an expert in fixing systems, he replied. But if my experience can help open doors for others, then I'll walk through cautiously and keep my eyes open. I'll do it, but I'll keep my independence. No strings that make me feel like I traded truth for opportunity. James nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. They resumed their walk. Across the river, Notre Dame rose against the deepening sky, scaffolding gleaming faintly where restoration pressed forward. Darius thought of home, of Tanya wiping sweat from her brow after double shifts, of Nia studying by lamp glow while city noise rattled their windows. He remembered the cabin's suffocating tension, Lily's cries piercing his concentration, and the decision to stand. One step into first class had cracked open a future he had barely dared imagine. It wasn't luck alone. It was years of unseen practice, nights holding his sister, lessons carved in sacrifice. Yet the world saw only the moment, the dramatic turn. He knew systemic change meant telling the whole story, not just the cinematic version. Tour boats passed, their passengers pointing cameras, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding on the riverbank between a billionaire and a chess prodigy. Street lamps haloed in mist, cyclists whirred past, couples strolled with arms linked. The city felt timeless, a place where conversations shaped more than evenings. They shaped trajectories. James paused by the Pont Alexandre III, its gilded statues gleaming against the night. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. I wanted to give you something, he said, offering it with a gravity that made Darius hesitate. Inside rested a chess set, the pieces carved from jade that caught the lamplight in deep green veins, each one cool and heavy with care. The night gleamed brightest, poised as if mid-leap. Darius lifted a pawn, weight pressing into his palm, eyes wide. This is too much, he whispered. It isn't, James countered. This is a reminder, not of me, not of wealth, but of the moment you trusted your instincts and changed everything. That night you sacrificed in London to win, it's here too. To remind you that boldness pays when guided by patience and clarity. Emotion swelled, thickening Darius's throat. He thought of every night on cracked pavement, every second guess, every barrier. Now, holding jade carved into the shape of his passion, he felt something rare, recognized across divides that once seemed uncrossable. He closed the box gently, tucked it under his arm, and looked out at the Seine, its surface still glowing gold. Thank you, he said simply, sincerity sharpening each syllable. James placed a hand on his shoulder. No, Darius, thank you. You gave me perspective, and you gave my daughter peace. That's worth more than anything else. As they walked back toward the hotel, the city continued its rhythm. Horns from distant boulevards, laughter spilling from terraces, the river, carrying reflections into the night. Darius felt taller somehow, not because of luxury or sponsorship, but because the world had finally acknowledged what had always been there: his potential, his resilience, his ability to turn quiet acts into transformations. Above them, the Eiffel Tower shimmered to life, thousands of lights flickering against the Parisian sky. He thought of Tanya and Nia, waiting for his call. He thought of the boy on the plane who had stood despite doubt, and he understood. Sometimes the smallest steps echo the loudest. And tonight, beneath the glow of a city built on dreams, his echo carried further than he had ever imagined. The wheels touched down at O'Hare under a sky streaked with copper and violet, and Darius felt the familiar pulse of Chicago rise through the cabin floor, a rhythm that belonged to him no matter how far he traveled. The city unfolded in sounds and smells as he left the terminal, car horns sharp as chess clocks, exhaust mingling with fried food drifting from corner vendors, the metallic groan of the L clattering across steel tracks. His sneakers met cracked pavement again, and the skyline shimmered like an old friend. He carried more than luggage now. He took a story that had begun 30,000 feet above the Atlantic and reshaped everything he thought possible. On the ride back to his South Side apartment, he replayed the chain of moves: a baby's relentless cries, a curtain separating worlds, his choice to stand, the hush that followed when compassion triumphed over skepticism. That single act rippled outward. James and Elise had begun rethinking what it meant to parent, what it meant to hold privilege responsibly. They had taken his lessons, the hum, the patience, the pressure points, and folded them into their family's rhythm. More than that, they had launched a new initiative under the Reed Foundation, honoring caregiving as a skill forged in adversity, creating scholarships that valued wisdom as much as test scores. And in the center of it all was Darius, not as a mascot, but as a voice-shaping direction, ensuring independence and dignity remained intact. Back in his bedroom, where walls bore the scuffs of years and the window overlooked alleys buzzing with radios and basketball echoes, he unpacked the jade chess set James had gifted him in Paris. He set the knight on the board first, its green facets catching stray light, remembering the sacrifice in London that sealed his victory. Chess had always been a mirror for life, quiet moves that shift everything, sacrifices that open hidden paths. What mattered wasn't the noise of triumph, but the precision of decisions made when no one expected them. He saw now that his plane encounter had been one such move, small yet seismic, changing not just his board, but many others. He thought of Tanya, still working double shifts, but lighter now with the knowledge that her son's education carried support. He thought of Nia, telling her friends that her brother wasn't just a player, but a champion recognized across oceans. And he thought of the passengers on that plane, who had witnessed a boy from economy bring calm where wealth had failed. Their silence that night had been disbelief, but their memory would remain proof that assumptions can be shattered in a heartbeat. As the city's night deepened and street lamps flickered to life, Darius sat by the window, studying the jade pieces, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the fire of possibility. His journey had only begun. The real victory wasn't the medal in London or the suite in Paris. It was knowing that bridges could be built where none existed, that empathy could be as powerful as any strategy, that lives could change when someone dared to act. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel, share it with friends, and comment where you're watching from. Let's keep building bridges with stories that matter. Don't miss our next tale. What happens next will inspire
You!